In the front room of a small cabin in California mountains, 3 people were murdered. A mother, her teenage son, and his friend, bound, beaten, and killed, just feet from where the rest of the family slept. And here is the part that has never stopped haunting me. In the next room, behind a thin cabin wall, 3 young children slept through the entire thing. Through all of it. And when the sun came up the next morning, 2 of those children were still there, alive, unharmed. The third was gone. A 12-year-old girl. Taken out of that cabin into the dark and not found for years. This happened in April of 1981 in a tiny mountain community called Keddie. The place was Cabin 28. And more than 40 years later, no one has ever been convicted of what was done inside it. It's a case that has everything that makes these stories impossible to forget. A brutal scene, sleeping children spared for no reason anyone can explain, a missing girl, an anonymous tip, suspects who were never charged, and a long, ugly trail of an investigation that may have lost the answer before it ever had it. This is the Keddie Cabin murders, and I'm going to tell it to you as plainly and as carefully as I can, because the people inside that cabin deserve at least that much. Let me set the place for you first. Keddie was a small resort community tucked into the mountains of Plumas County in Northern California. If that county sounds familiar to some of you, it should. It's the same rugged stretch of country tied to more than one dark story out of those mountains. Keddie itself was a cluster of old cabins near the railroad, the kind of quiet, woodsy place people went to get away from everything. Isolated, surrounded by forest, the kind of place where you feel safe precisely because there's no one around. In Cabin 28 lived a woman named Glenna Sue Sharp. Most people called her Sue. She was 36 years old, a mother who had recently moved her family there, looking, like a lot of people, for a fresh and quieter start. She had 5 children. On the night this happened, the household and its guests included her teenage son, John, who was 15, her daughters, Sheila, who was 14, and Tina, who was 12, and 2 younger boys, along with a friend who was staying over. There was also John's friend Dana Wingate, 17, visiting that night. An ordinary family, in an ordinary cabin, in a place where nothing was supposed to happen. By the next morning, 3 of them would be dead. 1 would be missing, and the survivors would carry that night for the rest of their lives. Here is how the world found out. On the night of April 11th, going into the 12th, 14-year-old Sheila had been staying next door at a neighbor's cabin. A small, ordinary thing, a teenager sleeping over close by. It is very likely the reason she is alive. When morning came, Sheila walked back to Cabin 28 to come home, and she opened the door onto a scene that no 14-year-old, that no person should ever have to see. In the living room were the bound and murdered bodies of her mother Sue, her brother John, and John's friend Dana. She ran. She got help. And soon the tiny community of Keddie was swallowed by something it could never have imagined. When investigators entered that cabin, the brutality of the scene told them this was not a robbery gone wrong, not a quick and panicked act. The 3 victims had been restrained. They had been beaten and stabbed. Whoever did this had spent time. There was rage in it, and there was control. I'm not going to walk you through the injuries one by one. It isn't necessary. And these were real people, a real mother and two real teenage boys, and they are owed more than to be reduced to a list of wounds. What matters is this: it was savage, it was personal in its violence, and it happened in a house full of people. Because that is the detail that turns this from a tragedy into a genuine mystery. When police searched the rest of the cabin, they found the other children. In a back bedroom, separated from the living room by little more than a wall, two of Sue's younger sons and their young friend were found, asleep, unharmed, untouched. Sit with that for a moment. In the front room, 3 people were being bound and beaten to death in an act of violence loud and prolonged and brutal, and a few feet away, behind a thin wall, 3 small boys slept through it and were left completely alone. Why? Why would someone capable of what was done in that living room simply leave the younger children alive in the next room? Did the boys truly sleep through it? Were they spared on purpose? Did the killers not know they were there or not care? Every answer you reach for opens another door you can't close. The official thinking over the years has leaned toward the idea that the violence was, in some way, targeted. That this was not a random monster who would kill anyone in the house, but someone whose rage was aimed. And if that's true, it changes the entire shape of the case, because it means the answer to who did this might not be a stranger from the dark at all. It might be someone who had a reason to be in that family's life. And then there was Tina. 12-year-old Tina Sharp had been in the cabin that night. She was not among the 3 found murdered in the living room, and she was not among the children found safe in the bedroom. She was simply gone. In the chaos and horror of that morning, as the scale of what had happened became clear, one fact stood out and refused to be explained. A 12-year-old girl had been taken out of that cabin. Whoever did this had, for reasons no one understood, removed her from the scene and carried her off into the mountains. The search for Tina became its own agony. A community already shattered by 3 murders now had to hope against everything that a little girl was somehow still out there alive. Volunteers searched. The forests around Keddie were combed. And nothing. No sign of her. Day after day. The not knowing stretched into weeks, and then months, and then years. For 3 years, Tina Sharp's fate was a hole in the middle of this case. Her family did not know if she was alive or dead, did not know where she was, did not know what had been done to her. 3 years of that particular kind of torture that only the families in these stories ever really understand. And when the answer finally came, it came in one of the strangest ways imaginable. In April of 1984, 3 years after that night, a piece of Tina was found. Far from Keddie, roughly 50 miles away, across a county line near a place called Camp 18, parts of a human skull and bones were discovered. They were eventually identified as Tina Sharp. 50 miles, 3 years. The little girl who had been carried out of Cabin 28 had ended up in the wilderness a county way, and it took all that time and a stroke of grim chance for her to be found at all. And here is where it gets stranger still. There are accounts that the discovery was helped along by an anonymous tip, that information pointing toward Tina's remains reached authorities from someone who knew. Someone out there knew where that little girl was and reached out anonymously from the shadows to point at it. Think about what that means. Whoever made contact either was involved or knew someone who was. The killer or someone close to the killer was alive in the world, carrying that knowledge, and chose, for reasons we'll never fully know, to let a piece of the truth slip out. Quick word before we go further. If you find yourself as gripped and as disturbed by these cases as I am, do me a favor and subscribe. This channel is built on exactly this, the cases that were closed but never solved. And there's a new one every week. All right, let's talk about the suspects. Because there were suspects. For a long time, two men in particular have sat at the center of this case. They were not strangers from a distant town. They were connected to that small community, neighbors, men who were around. And over the years, suspicion settled heavily on them. There were reports of a hammer believed to be connected to the killings. There were statements, accounts that one of the men made remarks over the years that seemed, to those who heard them, like the words of a man who knew far more than an innocent person should. But I need to be very careful here, and I'm going to be, because this is exactly the kind of case where reputations get destroyed by suspicion alone. Neither of those men was ever charged with these murders. Neither was ever convicted. One of them died in the year 2000, and the other years before that, without ever being brought to trial. Suspicion, no matter how heavy, is not proof. And I am not going to stand here and brand a specific dead man a child killer when a court of law never did. What I can tell you is that investigators kept circling back to people who were close to that family, and that the evidence, whatever it truly was never enough or never handled well enough to close the case in a courtroom. And that failure is its own part of this story. Because if there is a villain in the Keddie case beyond the killer themselves, many people would point at the investigation. This was 1981, a small rural county, a sheriff's department that had almost certainly never faced anything like this and was never built to. And over the years, as people went back and re-examined what happened, a painful picture emerged of a crime scene and an investigation that may have been mishandled from the start. Evidence that wasn't properly secured, leads that weren't fully chased, items that by some accounts went missing or were poorly preserved over the decades. In a case like this, the first hours and days are everything. The scene speaks, but only if you listen to it correctly and protect what it's telling you. And there is a real gnawing fear, shared by many who've studied Keddie, that the answer was there in the beginning, that the truth was sitting in that cabin, in that evidence, in those early leads, and that it slipped through the fingers of people who simply weren't equipped to hold on to it. Decades later, the case was reopened. Modern eyes, modern methods. At one point, investigators publicly named a person of interest. But naming is not charging, and charging is not convicting. And so, even now, after all of it, the Keddie murders remain officially unsolved. So, what happened in Cabin 28? Let me lay out the shape of it, honestly. The leading view for many years has been that this was not random, that the people responsible were known to the area, possibly known to the family, and that the killings were driven by some personal rage or motive we can only guess at. This fits the strange mercy of the sleeping boys left alive. It fits the brutality, which reads less like a stranger and more like someone with something burning in them. But it leaves the hardest questions standing. If it was personal, why take Tina? Why carry a 12-year-old 50 miles into the wilderness? Was she taken because she saw something? because she could identify someone, or for a reason darker than that I won't speculate on out of respect for her. And there's the anonymous tip years later, the thread suggesting someone out there always knew. If the answer was known to people in that community, how did it never become a conviction? Was it incompetence? Was it fear? Was it protection? Every road in this case runs into the same wall the others do. A scene that should have spoken, a community that may have known, a little girl carried into the dark, and a courtroom that never once delivered a verdict for any of them. I want to bring it back to the people before I let you go, because it's easy with a case this strange to get lost in the puzzle of it and forget what was actually lost. A mother named Sue, 36 years old, who moved her kids to a quiet mountain cabin hoping for something better and safer. Two teenage boys, John and Dana, 15 and 17, with their whole lives still ahead of them, gone in a single night. And Tina, 12 years old, carried out of her own home and lost to the world for 3 years before even a piece of her could be brought back. And the survivors, a 14-year-old girl who walked through her own front door into the worst thing a person can see and had to keep living afterward. 3 little boys who slept through a massacre and woke into a world that would never be steady again. That's what this case really is. Not a riddle. A family in a small cabin in the mountains, destroyed in a few hours by someone who, in all likelihood, walked back out into that community and kept living among the people who would spend the rest of their lives wondering. And somewhere, someone may still know, or did until the day they died and took it with them. So I'll leave it with you, the way I always do. What do you believe happened in Cabin 28? Was it someone close to that family, driven by a rage we'll never understand? Were the suspects the right men, failed only by a broken investigation? And why, of everyone in that cabin, was Tina the one taken into the dark? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and on this one especially, I want to hear what you think, because the people in this story never got the answer they were owed, and the least we can do is keep asking the question. I'm Gravenfield. The cases that were closed but never solved. If you made it this far, you understand what this channel is. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there, and hold the people you love a little closer tonight.